And when you think about human transformation in the context of digital transformation, what comes first? It's a chicken or the egg principle. And one of the things that I've experienced is when the human transformation either proceeds or coincides with the digital transformation leads to digital growth, which is that much more powerful. And that's where I want to break down each one of these new agreements for the workplace, while also providing some, we'll call them practical actions that someone who is watching or listening can take, starting with the first agreement here, which is find your path. What does that mean? Find your path.
No, it's all about finding your purpose, your personal purpose. The greater good that you're looking to do. This is beyond making money or generating revenue. It's where are you creating value? Where are you making the world a better place? Find that special passion of yours that you can apply, because it all starts from within. And I think as a leader, you've got to have that personal purpose first. We all, probably many of us have heard Simon Sinek's start with why. It starts with that individual purpose. That really is what I think elevates you and gives you the motivation. And I think when you're working towards a higher purpose, the money will find you naturally. When you're working because you are really doing something good and you're trying to create a positive impact, the money will follow, and you have to trust that. And I think it's oftentimes we get it backwards, and that's just not sustainable, in my opinion.
Well, you look at it, and I'll just use myself as an example. I was 100% focused on money for the first decade, but it almost, and it did, it caused my downfall. I reached a dark night of the soul moment back in 2012. And that's where David Dibble writes, he goes, quote, the key to change and the key to changing is not to try to change, but to first become aware of what's happening in the moment. And when he's talking about this idea of finding your path or your purpose, this is about mastery of awareness. Why do you think, whether it's an individual or a team or an organization, there might not be much awareness into why an organization does what an organization does, why a bank or credit union does what a bank or credit union does? Now, we know that, it's about the transaction, if you will, but I think that's the old world view as we're moving into a new time period to look beyond the transaction, to put the transformation of people over the transaction of dollars and cents. Why might there be a lack of awareness here to begin with in the first place, and to why we do what we do?
That's a really great question. I mean, I think part of it just comes down to being intentional with communicating your message. It's easy to get caught up in, the day-to-day and the tasks. I think when someone asks you what you do and your answer is, well, I create graphics or I create spreadsheets or whatever it is you do. I mean, yeah, sure, that is your day-to-day task, but it's not the why. And I think when you've got this awareness of the greater purpose, when someone asks you, what do you do? What do? I create an opportunity for people to have a bigger and better, brighter future through financial freedom and financial education. When you're working towards that is your motivation. I think that's what gets you going every single day. But I think a lot of times we just don't take the time to communicate that with our team and build that up and empower them to work towards that belief. And we just get kind of caught up in the dollar sign. It's a lack of awareness from the top down and just how powerful it can be when you have this common language and you're all working towards the same purpose and the shared goals together. So I think it's just people don't know. People aren't aware that this is such a powerful tool.
Yes, and that's where in banking on digital growth, I put purpose at the center of the digital growth blueprint. Because it's so easy to talk about, well, this is what we do. Back to your example of the graphics or the spreadsheet, or, we give loans and we take deposits. We talk about what we do, or this is how we do it, if you will. But what we really, I think, the opportunity for exponential growth, whether that be personal growth, professional growth, or both, comes from is why we do what we do. And that makes me think about Mike Schrag over at Centier Bank, family-owned bank, started in 1895. And Mike set the organization down a new path to enrich lives through financial guidance for an even better tomorrow. And that has become a North Star that is being socialized throughout the organization. But this came back to the point of gaining awareness. And awareness is gained through learning. It is gained through creating space and time to think about what you've learned. And that leads to quote unquote knowing. But knowing does not lead to growing. Knowing will only lead to growing when we make a commitment to apply what we learn and escape the cave of complacency. And I think one of the best ways to escape the cave of complacency, and what we have known to be true so far, that we find comfort and solace in, but can be very dangerous to get trapped there, leads us to the second agreement, which is to love, grow, and serve your people. Where are the biggest opportunities here?
Yeah, so one of the things that David Dibble writes about is your organization is a living being. It is made up of living beings. And so you have to love and grow and serve your people as such. And the very first thing he says is to love your people. This is not liking your people or enjoying their personality. It's about the definition of love, like you have shared many times. It's willing the good of others. It's wanting to see them succeed. It's believing in them and supporting in them. And so that's the first and foremost. When you think about love, I think sometimes it's hard to talk about that word in a professional setting.
I want to pause you on that. Why? Why is that? Because, this chapter opens up with a quote from the Lebanese poet, Khalil Gibran, who notes that all work, quote, all work is empty save where there is love, end quote. Why do we have such a hard time talking about this, you think?
I think it's love is an emotion. We use it when we're talking about our relationships, whether or not you're in love with your partner or your spouse, you love your children. And so we've kind of limited our thinking on what that word love means instead of broadening it out. And so when you think about love, and if you just focus on that definition of willing the good of others, I think it makes it a little bit easier to talk about. And especially in a business setting, we try to keep things professional, and especially in I think our industry too. It's uncomfortable. You know what? I think it just comes down to being uncomfortable with using your emotions and using that word.
I think love goes beyond emotion. Love is a choice that we have to make. Coming back to, and I think that's one of the reasons I like Thomas Aquinas' definition. It's a choice to will the good, to want the good of another human being. And that's where I come back to, I mentioned Mike Schrag over at Centir with this purpose that they're moving towards to enrich lives through financial guidance for an even better tomorrow. Well, what's the root of that is Mike's servant heart culture. And, one of the things that David Dibble writes about, he goes, without love, there is much to fear. And I want to quote this. Why don't, and this from the book, why don't we love our customers? Fear. Why do we have so much turnover? Fear. Why can't we work together? Fear. Why don't we really change our organizations? Fear. Why is morale so low? Fear. How do we overcome fear within ourselves, within our teams, within our organizations to move forward with courage and confidence?
It's funny because I actually wrote down, those are my notes too. When we were talking about in this chapter, when it talked about love, grow, and serve your people, I wrote down what is stopping this from happening. And it is fear, 100% fear, whether it's fear because it's different, it's uncomfortable. When you talk about growing your people, investing in them, empowering them to level up and learn more, there's a lot of fear tied to that. We just spoke with someone in an organization who had an opportunity to level up their expertise and get a certification. And their organization asked them to sign a contract that said, if you leave within a year of getting the certification, you have to pay us back. That is coming from a place of fear. And it is giving a very bad taste in that person's mouth, because what you're saying at that point is, I want to level you up because I want to benefit from it, not because I want you
versus
to
abundance. Scarcity versus abundance. Yeah.
It is. Life gives to the giver. And so you have to have this faith and this trust in your people. And you know what? If you don't trust them, then they probably shouldn't be in your organization. But I agree. It really comes down to this place of fear. And the second part was talking about, or the third part was serving your people, caring about them on a personal and a professional level. And I think there's a little bit of fear tied to that, breaking those walls down. When you're in this professional setting, you're used to keeping it to that subject matter. But I think you've got to kind of break those walls down and be a little bit more vulnerable to really get to know your people and see what you can do for them and care for them, and you're going to get it in return.
Well, this comes back to, I want to come back to that quote that is so funny that you wrote this down, I wrote this down, but reframe this. And I'm not going to use the word love because, and even if I think about this idea, Muhammad Anwar, a friend of mine from a long time ago, wrote a book, and we talked about this on the podcast, called Love as a Business Strategy. And I get it. Like and I address this in Banking on Digital Growth. When you look at the banker's brain, it is a beautiful mind. It is a smart mind. It is an analytical mind. It's the left brain, if you will. But what we're talking about is more of right brain, not just thinking, but right brain feeling. So let me reframe this, because before, for context, why don't we love our customers? Fear. Why do we have so much turnover? Fear. Why can't we work together? Fear. Why don't we really change our organizations? Fear. Why is morale so low? Fear. Let's reframe this. How do we love our customers to will the good of them? How do we lower turnover to will the good of our team members? How can we work even better together to will the good of each other? How do we really change our organizations? Well, we really have to change ourselves to will the good of ourselves. And that's the thing, like when you think about this idea of, it's fear. What is that rooted in? Maybe it's the fear of the self. Maybe because I don't trust other people because I don't trust myself. That connects back to the original point of awareness and why awareness is key to exponential growth, to transformative growth. But I think the good news here, quantifiably, the good news, and David Dibble wrote about this, and I'm going to quote him. He said, "It appears when the top 5 to 15% of a company, including top management, have ignited the energy," and the energy, if you will, here he's talking about this idea of love, growth, service, in themselves, and are committed to a new vision, the entire culture follows. It's not a matter of if, but when. Think about that. 5 to 15% being inspired that human transformation, that can lead to a massive transformation, transformative growth for the individual, for the teams, and for the organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really does start from the leader, from the top down, and ignite, like you said, igniting that fire, that passion, so that it is contagious. I think we underestimate as leaders how much our team and our organization is looking at us. And subconsciously or not, they're going to pick up on our behaviors. We are a model for them. And so we have to be really conscious about our words, our actions, because they're setting the example and they're setting the tone for the rest of the organization. Look at Zappos, having a leader like Tony Hsieh at the top. That organization, that business was crumbling, but because he had the fire and the passion within, I mean, he literally built that business back up from the ground with nothing, but because he had the belief and the passion and the drive, and his people saw that and they gravitated towards it and they wanted a piece of it and they believed in it. I mean, it was an incredibly remarkable story.
I think about a CEO that I recently had a conversation with. And like I do all conversations, I opened up with, "Tell me something good. What's been well for you?" And this particular individual, every time I speak to them, like, I don't know, it's been kind of a rough week. It's been kind of a rough month. And in this most recent conversation, I learned that they were having some challenges with retention and turnover.
Well,
And I just, like, it was one of those things that the leadership, if you will, of the CEO and how they're perceiving the future. And I think a lot of it is it's future-based fear for this particular individual. How they're perceiving the future is directly influencing not just their thinking, not just their decisions, not just their actions in the present moment, but more deeply their feelings and their emotions. And we're going to come back to that point here in just a bit. This is why we have developed a future growth index to provide a benchmark of where an individual or a team or an organization is and how they're perceiving the future. But then you can take that to the next level and we can look at the exponential growth index and how one perceives that they're growing either personally or professionally over the previous 90 days.